The hate, the fear and the division that the far right are peddling and trying to direct against vulnerable asylum seekers and refugees is utterly despicable, and is made all the more despicable when you think that generations, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Irish people who went abroad, migrated, often illegally in the case of the United States, suffered the same kind of racist, horrendous victimisation. No dogs, no blacks, no Irishmen. Tabloid newspapers in Britain, owned by the right wing and the far right, creating horrible stereotypes about the Irish being violent, drunken, they were all terrorists, they were sexual deviants, all the same sort of filth that you now hear from the far right being heaped onto desperate and vulnerable people who've come here looking for a better life, in many cases fleeing persecution, war and suffering. So their filth has to be absolutely rejected, and I would encourage anybody who is inclined towards listening to their racist bile and the poison and misinformation that they are trying to circulate to just consider our own history. It really is a shameful betrayal of the suffering that Irish people, along with people of colour, suffered for many generations. But I need to say also that the government have set asylum seekers and refugees up for much of this targeting by the way they have treated them. Putting people out in tents, hundreds of them, with no roof over their head, is marking them out for the sort of victimisation that the far right have piled on them. Creating a distinction between Ukrainian refugees and asylum applicants sends a racist dog whistle, that there's a difference between the two. And the government have to acknowledge that. And it shouldn't be the case. Because just like Irish people, often illegally, went abroad, but they contributed to the United States, to Britain and so on, people coming here, given the chance, given the opportunity, will work and contribute and enrich our society and make our society better. But yet, we often send signals that these people somehow are something to worry about, that they're a burden, and we play into the hands of the far right when we do that. So I think we have to acknowledge that. Secondly, we also have to acknowledge, while absolutely rejecting the filth of racism of the far right and saying we welcome the new arrivals, we also have to recognise the deprivation and lack of resources that often exist, particularly in more deprived, working class communities, that are the responsibility of government, and we have to put in the resources without giving an inch to the far right or any notions of veto or anything else. What we do have to do is recognise our failures and put in the resources and the supports and the funding that can help communities provide the services and supports and facilities that will allow integration to happen successfully. And I said to the Minister the other day, you know, the Community Recognition Fund is a good idea, but it's already maxed out. Those monies should be put in advance, and there should be proactive work by the government to identify community organisations, groups, sports organisations, arts and cultural organisations, to give them support to actively deal with the integration efforts. So there should be an immediate replenishing of that fund. Finally, Minister, I would just say also, all roads lead to housing and accommodation in terms of the difficulties. We would not have so much difficulty and there wouldn't be so much space given to the far right and the racists if we didn't have such a severe housing crisis. And we've been saying, both on the housing and accommodation crisis, for years, you need much more aggressive, proactive action on vacant and empty properties. It's beginning to happen now, but we are still a long way from doing it. So there needs to be much more investment and just robust action willing to stand up to speculators and people sitting on empty properties to get those properties back into use, so we have housing for everybody, whether it's homeless people or asylum applicants fleeing persecution and war.